Bueno, muy buenos días.
Good morning.
¿Me escuchan, verdad?
Can you all
¿Sí? ¿Se
hear me?
escucha? Bueno, vamos a dar
Very well.
inicio
So we're
formal
going
entonces luego
to
de la foto
begin
grupal
after the
al tercer
family
día, la
photo.
tercera jornada de
This
la
third
Semana
day
Tecnológica
of the
Digital, edición
Digital
2024. Como dijimos
Agriculture
ayer, para quienes
Week
nos siguen
2024
virtualmente
for those
en
who
los
are
canales de YouTube del ICA.
online virtually through
El
YouTube
evento
channels
está ocurriendo
AICA.
desde la sede central
This
del
event
ICA
is
en
in the
San
main
José.
headquarters of AICA
Estamos
in San
representando a
Jose.
Canadá y Estados
We're in
Unidos
the
desde hace un par de
Canada
días.
USA
Somos más de
room.
100 personas
It's
presentes
over
ya.
100 of us here
Espero
present.
que quienes nos siguen
I hope
virtualmente estén
that those who
disfrutando
are
como nosotros
following are
las
also enjoying
distintas actividades que
the
tuvimos a lo largo de
various
estos días.
activities we've had these
Para
days.
comenzar,
And to begin,
vamos a tener una
we will
presentación
have a presentation,
a cargo de Lawrence Clerks,
and this
quien
is
ya intervino en
Lawrence
actividades
Clerks, who
previas de
already
esta
had an
semana.
intervention this week.
Creo que ya todos lo
I
conocemos, pero
believe
de
we
todas
all
maneras
know
me
who
voy a
he is,
permitir
but I'll
presentarlo formalmente,
go ahead and introduce him
principalmente para
formally,
quienes se
mainly
conectan
for those who
por
are
primera vez
connected
al
for the
evento.
first time to this event.
Lawrence es profesor
Lawrence
de la
is
Facultad de Ciencias
professor
Agrarias
of
de la
the
Universidad de Talca
Agri
en Chile y a su vez
Sciences in
profesor del Grupo de
Talca,
Conocimiento y
Chile,
Tecnología
professor
de
of
Innovación de la
Knowledge,
Universidad de
Science,
Wageningen
Technology of
en
the Wageningen,
Holanda, Países Bajos.
uh,
Es experto
Holland
en cuestiones que tienen que
University,
ver con
and
innovación
he
agrícola,
is related
ciencia e
to
investigación desde hace mucho tiempo, es una
agro
referencia en ese
innovation
sector,
for a long time. He's a
y por supuesto también docencia y
reference of
supervisión
that, and of
en su
course he's a
actividad
professor
académica.
and
Es
the
un placer
supervision
tenerlo a Lawrence
academic. So
hoy
it's a
aquí con
pleasure
esta
having Lawrence
presentación
here with
y a
this
lo largo de toda la
presentation
semana en
and
este
throughout the
evento.
week
Su
in this
presentación,
event.
y ya
And
termino con esto,
his presentation,
como habrán visto en la agenda,
as you have seen in the
tiene un
agenda,
título algo
it has a title which is a
provocador,
bit
llamaría yo, que nos invita a la reflexión,
provoking
para decirlo de
that
otro modo,
encourages
que tiene que ver
us
con
to reflect, which is
qué
related
startups,
to
AgTechs
if
serán o
AgTech
no
startups
quienes
are
lideran la transformación
the
de los sistemas
ones that
agroalimentarios
lead
en
the
el futuro.
transformation of agri-food
Lawrence, muchas gracias
systems going forward.
por estar aquí.
And Lawrence, thank you very much for being here. Please go ahead.
Muchas gracias, Federico.
Thank you very much, Federico. I will stand. And you made me choose between presenting or dancing. And I said, as Dutch, who is not a good dancer, I will not dance. So what I do normally, I'll give a class, pretty much a lecture. It's more a reflection. So the intention is to open our eyes, and you as policy creators, startups, venture capitalists, to think of how we are part of a transformation of agri-food systems. And we have to be very much aware of, because there will be a test, and tomorrow we'll have the questions. And those who don't pass the test, you have to say in Costa Rica, you won't be able to go back home. And pay attention. First, we're going to look and see in the back, over there. Where should I point? Right there. It's going very fast. Presentation is ready. Very well. And patience. Who's heard of this model? Who has seen this model? Raise your hand. By show of hands, who has seen this model? 2 or 3. There's a couple of you, but it's not very many of you. And this is the model of planet limits. It's been done through studies of the Stockholm Resilience Center, University of Stockholm, Johan Rockström, and he's a very well-known scientist. I wouldn't be surprised if he won a Nobel Prize at some point. And he worked with a team of ecologists, geographists, and geographers, and a number of scientists studying the planet system or the health of the planet. And with his team, Johan defined what is called a safe operating space for humanity. So a safe place to operate for humanity. And this was done through various parameters that determine the health of the planet and parameters that influence and determine the health of the planet. For instance, health of the oceans, acidification, for instance, water usage, deforestation, contamination by particles. So there's a number of elements that determine the health of the planet and also the threats. And as you can see in the image to the left, we are surpassing several planet limits. The green part is a safe operating space, but in other elements, we're reducing that. And we all know that the climate crisis is affecting, but also the loss of biodiversity can also be a threat. And here we have options for the crops of the future. If we only concentrate on 10 of these and we no longer will have genetic material if we had to change. And also how we use a lot of these fertilizers. We change the soil composition, health of the soil. So that's his position. He says, well, to live well, he says, we have to move in the planet limits, within the planet limits. And this is something we're now discussing, is how to reduce the impact of climate change and thus prevent temperature from raising. And there's a lot of discussion on how we can reduce the loss of biodiversity and reintroduce biodiversity. So the figure to the right, where you see the dots, this shows where agriculture has a role. So it's not very pretty because in several of these elements where we are surpassing the planet limits, agriculture has a role there as far as emissions, the use of land, the reduction of biodiversity, water pollution, so on and so forth, water usage. For instance, there are many countries, aquifers are not empty, but very depleted, and this threatens and our safe operating space. This is not very pretty to look at, but it's a fact. And this has implications for food systems. It has implications on how we organize agriculture, but what goes also beyond agriculture, how we consume products, how we recycle waste, how we prevent loss and waste. So we must work very hard, and it's nothing new for many of you that this agri-food system has to be healthier. It has to fit within these planet limits. And in the image to the right, you see that the agri-food system impacts and contributes in different areas of SDGs. And I also heard that several states are aware of this, and they also mention with their when they give their speech how they can contribute to several of these SDGs. Another thing related to these planet limits is the diet for the planet. It sounds very nice in Spanish, diet, planet-proof diet. Who has heard of this? Raise your hands by show of hands. Andrea, very well. And or you don't have to take the test tomorrow. You know about this, so you don't have to take that test. So this comes from a commission linked to the study of planet limits. There was a report published in the Lancet Scientific Journal on Medicine and Health, and there it asks, or it states, what's a healthy diet for people, because the agri-food system, as we know it, it not only has positive effects, but it's very capable of producing sufficient. Generally, the distribution is not equal. Some don't have access to food, although these are being produced. But people's nutrition has changed a lot to some healthier food, a higher consumption of meat, saturated, non-saturated, some carbohydrates. And what they say is, well, we have to rethink the diet and think of something healthier for people, but also for the planet. And what they mainly say is that the consumption of meat has to be reduced for the good of the planet as well as for people's health. And another thing that's also being debated currently is that the agri-food system is also based on the economic system we have created. At the end of the day, throughout the world, it's a free market. There are very few countries where there's still communism or pure socialism. Even China, that was a communist country, there's a strange mix between communism and a hyper liberal market. And this has worked very well. We have a lot of economic exchange between countries. Economic growth has also caused for many countries to leave poverty, but it has a cost, externalities in nature, externalities in people, exploitation, cheap labor, bad working conditions, and at the end, capitalism is also always looking where to produce at the lowest cost. And this also has effects in other places. When a factory is closed, it moves somewhere else. And each one has your opinion of what a good economy is. However, what I want to show here is that in economic sciences, there's more debate now if this is the model to have a healthy planet, to have a agri-food system that is also sustainable. So here we have the Great Wall, Kale Rayward. She's British, who works with Planet Limits. You can see this in that image right there to the left, red image. In Latin America, a very strong philosophy of good living. How do you live well? What is sufficient? Also, solidarity economy, where it's maximizing use but it's to support each other, to live together. So there are some theories a little more polemic, like the post-growth. It's nice to reduce life, but you have to have a decent level for living. But all this is based in sufficiency and in the division of goods, where there are no longer hyper mega rich people that they're going to be taxed, that 1% that own 80% of the capital of the world. So all these are models that are being part of the debate. And at the end of the day, that's what this shows there with the iceberg from a book called Handbook of Diverse Economies. And what they state is, well, this is what we have today, and it's only a model. There are many models under the surface which could be relevant. So it's not easy to find one system that works because we've had fails in the past. So all these scientific debates in reports and workshops, in the media, there's influencers in social media who also promote their views on sustainability. This has also reached agro and agri-food systems. So if you speak about society transformations, in the past, it was much more focused on energy. But now you can see that food is very sexy. There are many influencers, young influencers who speak about food, speak about the food system, and this is also reflected on what happens in the scientific world, political world. A few years ago, we had the first summit of the United Nations on food systems and the World Bank. If you haven't seen that report, very interesting. Future landscape, food landscape, to see what could be the route for Latin America on transform food systems, including a highly technified system within these scenarios uh, they're presenting. There was a very interesting report from the Cornell University how social technical combinations to transform the food system, because you can now transform just a small element, but many elements require attention or work. So this is a matter of debate currently. So what is transformation? To say it simply, I'm not going to present any heavy theory, and I do apologize if it is, but it's a process of multiple changes in all areas of food system, not only optimize production, but also rethink the chain, the economic model of the country. I am from Netherlands, as you know. I am I have I'm a little Chilandes, Chile also. So, but in my country of origin, we're thinking of decreasing animal production to 50%. And this means that basically we'll phase out part of the infrastructure or convert or transform all these intensive animal farms in something else. This also means that is rethinking, and we want to be exporters and we want to feed the world. Holland, the second exporter of the world. Well, we want to be a re-exporter, but this has a very high cost because Holland, with its surface, cannot support all of that. It doesn't have the carrying capacity. So we're thinking much more of what the country can support as far as production and exporting. So it's not only changing production, but also the economic model, changes in logistics. Sometimes we have to change diets or consumption patterns, what people buy. And this requires technological innovations, but also social innovations. We're used to our barbecues Sunday afternoons, very good. We have several colleagues here from Uruguay and Argentina who were brought up with steak. And if you analyze genetic analysis, they're pretty much 90% bovine, these colleagues, and tell an Argentinian that you're going to have a burger, a mushroom burger for barbecue instead of barbecue on Sunday. They won't accept it like that. It requires cultural changes if you want to achieve that. And these are social innovations. And also it requires to bring out non-desired elements from the existing system. So not only innovate, but ex-novate. It's a word game, but we have to do away with non-desired things. And I think that's the most difficult part because it's highly political, because people never want to lose. Human beings have this psychological thing where we like to win, but we're afraid of losing things. It's huge. It erases our brain, and we're all like afraid of this. And this is where the theory comes. Yes, I am a scientist, and I do apologize, but I cannot do other than this. So, from my discipline, innovation studies, and transformation, we use this model widely to understand the complexity of these types of transformations. And I included here a transformation to the left is as an example of agriculture. In most, not everywhere, but in most places, we changed from animal traction, horses, oxen, tractors to tractors. And now we are in a transition to drones, autonomous tractors, so on and so forth. I know it has not happened everywhere, but it has happened in many places where animal traction it's being promoted for tractors. So that's also happening in some places, but many of you are already promoting transition to what's in the bottom. of the screen. And this model, it came from a historical study of these types of transformations and how they have happened not only from animals to super robots, but they also studied the evolution of sailboats or steamboats to steamboats, and then oil or fuel boats, and now to boats with solar panels and things like that. But here we have noticed that they generally these transformations start in niches, social technical niches, not market niches. These are niches and places where new combinations happen, new ideas. These are networks of innovators who want to change the system. Currently, we have a lot of renewable energy, and this is thanks to some mad people who in the 70s started thinking after the oil crisis, the conflict with Arab countries that affected mainly Europe and the US. They started thinking how we can become independent from that. And then the debate of the Rome Club started, and there they started with the new solar panels and windmills in countries like Denmark and Holland. And in 1970, now we're in 2024. Now, 50 years, it takes a long time to make it massive. These technifications don't happen overnight, but they created these niches, and some saw them as the crazies. They didn't have great support, except for a little money for research. But that slowly grew and started changing the energy system or in other existing systems. And this is called, in this theory, the social technical regime. Regime sounds like political, like heavy, authoritarian, but it makes some sense because this regime is closed. An existing system consists of many links between elements. There's infrastructures that are established. There are economic players that are established. There are established practices. There's knowledge, established knowledge. The science technology apparatus supports the improvement of existing system, and an existing system continues innovation, but generally with small steps. And this is a more radical proposal. The idea is that slowly all of these elements change, like in the center, market preferences, size, culture, technology, public policy, and industry. And these changes materialize. It's not an easy thing. For instance, in the world of transportation, electric vehicles, alternate energy, oil companies are still saying that they want to be the leaders in renewables, but they're not doing it because the investors want their return, and that comes from oil. So it's a system that's kind of stable. We have the social technical landscape with big developments, but there's also climate change, the growth of world population, economic crisis. With Jeremias, I was discussing in the morning how come the direct planning in changed so quickly because of macroeconomy. It made it very favorable in his country. What was a niche, it became the regime very quickly, which is the established system. And the idea, if you want to stimulate radical innovation, if you really want to stimulate this transformation, sometimes you have to protect these niches with subsidies, with state support, and even the niches create their own space for experimentation. If you think about innovation from the basis, indigenous innovations, agroecological movements, they're generally not supported by subsidies in the past, and not in any case, but they create their own space to experiment because they believe that's the alternative that is worthwhile for the future. And also, startups somehow are protected although they have to get a return to the venture capitalists, they also create a very protected area to then go aggressively into a market without having to compete with the others. Or you can compete with players, established players, at a very low cost. Netflix started very cheap. Uber started very cheap. Google, everything's going to be free, we all thought. And that's how they gained competitive or market advantage. And the others are gone. The regime ended. Conventional cabs did not die, but it's been reduced. And now they started raising rates, but they were also protected, but by venture capital. And this is an example. I do apologize if I offend someone. Clearly, this cow does not compete with the Argentinian cow. Argentinian cow is much tastier, much more delicious. I'm going to be kicked out of this country. Someone's going to say you said something bad about Chilean cows. So to the left is the niche, high native protein, and this is happening. There are some companies, but they're not dominant. Animal protein continues being dominant, but the nut co is like mayonnaise and other products based on plant ingredients. This Chilean unicorn it has a more vegetable or plant diet, microprotein, insects. This is more food tech, and it's happening also in Chile. There are many companies who are working on this, and on the other side we have conventional system of meat or beef production. It depends on the perspective you have. If something is niche or regime, you can also say that meat production the traditional way or with feedlots. Yes, feedlots. You could say that regenerative livestock is the niche that also tries to change that, but it depends also on the perspective you have.
And well, as I mentioned, we don't just need niche innovation, we also need exnovation. This is from colleagues from Rotterdam, from the Drift Institute, the Dutch Institute for Research Transitions. This in the Netherlands is already a scientific discipline. And they say the existing regimes, the dominant regimes, work on optimization. But at some times there's pressure due to external factors and due to the niches. Then there's destabilization, there's competition, there's other ideas, and you enter a stage of chaos. And then the niche rises. I believe that in agriculture, we're right here. There are many things that are happening. And we know that based on established systems, we always need to change the pressure, but we don't have a new system. We don't yet have to phase out of the currently existing food systems. And here's an example. This does not come from the Mandalorian. It does not come from Star Wars. This is a central power plant for solar power plant in the Atacama Desert. And this is a niche that became dominant. There's a high level of renewables in Chile right now, and this is a case of exnovation. Chile said, on such and such a date, we will shut down the coal-based power plants. This was not lauded by everyone. It's also a loss of employment, etc., but it was done. And so we stimulated the niche, and the social technical regime happened. And so this is an example of transformation of the energy grid system. So in agriculture, as I mentioned, we're in this chaos stage currently. We have a lot of emergent models. We do not have a single future. We have several possible futures. And I think that we need several futures, because I think that in the past, we thought that we could build a single model, one size fits all, and that is not the case. In practice, we saw it happening. People tried to follow that single model, but some people said, no, we don't want to change to that model. Our model works. It's been working well for us for a long time, and it works. So this focus is more on several different niches with several different values. In particular, food is an issue of values. It's an issue of culture. It's an issue of history. It's something that it's almost physical, emotional. The memories of that meal that your grandma prepared for you. And if somebody comes and tells you, no, you can't cook that meal anymore, that will cause some strong emotions in people. And so there are different socio-technological paradigms, even startups. Startups have a certain paradigms. They have a belief in a particular type of future. And so there's thousands of concepts in this maelstrom. And we can see this sustainable intensification. This is just for agriculture. I'm not even covering food, proteins, etc. Sustainable intensification, eco-friendly intensification, agriculture 4.0, 5.0, 6.0, circular agricultural, vertical agricultural, regenerative agriculture, inclusive agriculture, positive agriculture for nature, etc., etc., etc. And so I go back to Chile's example. I'm sorry, it's the one I know best in all of Latin America. And in Chile, we see this happening. A short time ago, we had a summit on regenerative agriculture at the university in Chile. There's also urban agriculture, vertical agriculture. We're looking at circular agriculture there as a way for transformation. Also, eco-friendly agriculture. All of these movements are there represented in Chile. So even in Chile, we can see the development of these various niches. Everybody wants to change the food system according to their vision. Now, next, I'm going to talk about startups. Don't worry. And this is something that represents my country, the Netherlands. The Netherlands also like to plan very long term. This is something that defines us. We are great planners. And that's because otherwise we would all have been drowned in the Northern Sea because we had planned. That's how our country exists. There we focus a lot on circular agriculture. That's the large-scale vision for the country. That's the country-level vision. Circular agriculture. Things have to be agriculture. They have to be based on what can sustain the country throughout the whole chain. And this is gaining ground in some other countries in the region right now, sometimes due to active intervention. In Colombia, for example, the Netherlands carried out a project through the embassy to introduce this model in Chile as well. They're doing it a little with bioeconomy, circularity. It is present in the region as well. But this is an example of another niche, another socio-technical niche. It's not one company. It's not one scientist. This is a whole network. And now, this is what you're interested in. Startups. AgTech startups as agents of change, transformers. We know that in the public debate, in the media, we attribute this particular quality to startups. I added a few news items there. One is from Spain. The other, AgroClave, I think, is from Argentina. The Method, Colombia. FNX, that's the Netherlands. That was part of the conversation in the latest version. It was very strong. The impact of transformation. But I think that AgTech startups are stakeholders that are positioned in what we call the twin transition. Anybody here has heard the term twin transition? Oh, a few people that won't have to take the exam. That's great. This is how digital transformation, digital transition shouldn't be just digital, but it also should support sustainability transition, eco-friendly transition. And the sweet spot is right there, where digital amplifies sustainability. And the thesis behind this is that twin transition, digitalization can help amplify sustainability, eco-friendly sustainability. social sustainability, etc. And I think that potentially startups are right in the sweet spot. You are right in the sweet spot. How do you translate sweet spot into Spanish? We need to be careful because otherwise, I mean, they're going to put me in jail if I misnomer more issues. Anyway, this is a question. Some scientists claim that that is so. And I'm here also, covering a little bit of what the science realm says about this. Here, there's an article that is more about the chemistry sector, which is also highly relevant for agriculture. And they say, yes, they can be key stakeholders in this transition. But it has to be measurable. It has to be done in collaboration with the users. And it also has to be authentic. That is another very important, an authentic intention. And here's another article from Horne and Fichter, Germans, and they say these startups can do it, yes. But what's interesting here is that these two individuals, Horne and Fichter, use this multiple level model to include the startups. And they say this, they see it a little bit as the implementers of the solutions that come more from shielded niches. They take a little bit what science does, protected by projects, and then they take it to market. I think that the niche itself is still shielded. And the idea behind this is that this will be introduced into the existing system, struggling with this, amplifying it. Oftentimes, startups say very radical things. They will say things like, we're going to disrupt the system. And this, at some point, can lead to a change of the socio-technical regime. So some people say it can be done, but some others say that it cannot be done. This is a healthy scientific debate, and it's not just scientists, but also NGOs, but especially in the realm of sociology. Sociologists are usually highly critical. That's part of their DNA, but they've researched a little bit how this is unfolding in places like Australia, Silicon Valley itself, and they are highly critical of this process because they say it's actually a kind of sleight of hand. It may look like sustainability, it may look like disruption, but at the end of the day, it's non-disruptive disruption. They also claim fixing the food system with a limited menu. It's also about kind of taking advantage of, this is more of an external socio-technical landscape. They're just taking advantage that there's low interest, there's money available out there, investors seeking opportunity. This has changed it a little bit, but it has been mentioned yesterday during lunch that some people are not really interested in the least the agricultural world. They simply want to invest because it's profitable. So they're highly critical of this. So the main criticism is ambition versus true contribution. So here I added as a summary the criticism of large ambition by startups, but oftentimes halted by a short-term focus and return on investments by investors. So they talk about radical innovation, but a lot of it is just strengthening the current system, or it's just a simplistic vision based on technology, where technology is the magical solution, and technology is not going to change the psychology of food or the culture of food. And also, and this is the most critical, greenwashing and collaterals. And here I have a couple of reports from an activist group that is very strong activism. Everything is bad for them, I must say this, but at least that's how I interpret it based on their publication. And here to say, behind the cloud, the environmental impact of digitalization. But this is even worse. The horse of Troy in the fields. And this, they say, is even worse. And you could say AI, and we're going to revolutionize agriculture and the data center, and it's just using water. And I saved so much water in my irrigation system, but that water is being used by Google for its data center. So what is the true environmental impact? So that's kind of the critical impact, looking at it like a Trojan horse. And so here we have three key questions. I think this is a reflection for you as well. This was my introduction, but it would be good if you think about this. Think about it on your plane home. What type of changes do startups result in? How do startups act as a coherent niche? And third question is, what venture capital can do and public policy can do to facilitate the role of startups as true agents of change? So the first is, what type of AgTech startups result in? I think that we need to think both as startups, but also as policymakers who want to foster this transition. What do startups really do? It's usually optimization of efficiency and reduction of externalities. Is it the substitution of something that's bad? But sometimes there's a substitution of something that is natural for something highly technical. Yesterday, I was discussing with a colleague, the one from the bees, where is she? Oh, she's over there. Yes, Maria Pilar, right? Yeah, right, good. And we were discussing the fact that, on the one hand, bees are suffering because of a loss of biodiversity. As a solution, we're entering pollinizer native moths. Is that the path forward, or should we try to increase biodiversity? So this is a substitution that might even seem negative. Some do that. Some do that. Others optimize the socio-technical regime, and maybe there's a net benefit, but they shouldn't change it. Others change by elements. And the last category, and there might be intermediate categories as well, do they actually transform? Do they actually re-envision the system? They combine the system with a new offer that is completely different. And here we have, as an example, digital agroecological efforts. Many people oppose it. Even agroecologists oppose it. They say digitalization, we don't want it. Just read the IPES foods. They just say digitalization is the worst thing in the world. And others say, no, this is a very viable merger. But it does require re-envisioning the field. It requires re-envisioning breeding, genetics for the crops. We need to harvest differently. We need to have robots that are not for single crops, robots that know how to handle diversity. This is occurring, and in fact, ECLAC, Monica, are you still here, or has she left? Yes. ECLAC is working on this, on digitalization in service to the agroecological transition. So this is a sort of just a few thoughts that I wanted to share and that you need to ask yourselves. Second question is, how do AgTech startups act as a coherent niche? Here I have a picture of the minicorn, sunicorn, unicorn, decacorn, and hectacorn. Sounds great. It sounds like a Kentucky Fried Chicken combo. Give me a hectacorn. This is like the dream. We want to be like Uber, the hectacorn that conquers the world. That's the dream for several startups. And generally speaking, the dream is a bit more limited. We're hoping to be bought out. Hopefully, we'll be bought out by a larger company and we'll go on holidays for the rest of our lives. Not everybody wants to be a hectacorn. But anyway, for transition, is that the path forward? Can this really create the diversity of different new systems? So the question is, do we need to act in a silo, or do we need to act as a herd? Here I have a beautiful picture of a herd of unicorns. I could have taken it from My Little Pony, but I thought that was a bit too childish. Now, a startup herd as a niche. Now, the socio-technical niches are a collaborative of stakeholders, and sometimes they need to move together because they need to change structures that are highly inert. Francisco Asturuaga already mentioned this. We need to work together to solve issues. But if you also believe in a transformative alternative, we need to work towards this together, because that will be a strong position from the socio-technical perspective. So we need to kind of come together as a herd. A niche for vertical agriculture, a niche for circular agriculture. I did this in Chile, where I spoke with Vertical Agriculture Collective, and they told me, we do not really act with other companies in Chile because we see them more as competition. But we interact with other companies in other countries because they don't look like competitors to us. So we need to look at the balance between being collaborative and competitive. So it's important for AgTech startups to define what socio-technical niche they are a part of and what their position is. Here we go into the topic of substitution and transformation. You may say, I want to try to slowly change things, and I'm going to use a strategy of fit and conform. I'll try to change it a little bit, but at the same time, I try to conform to the existing system. But the cumulative effect will be that I'm causing change. The regime is not all bad, and large-scale companies also can change, but sometimes it's not enough. Some people say it will never be enough, but still, you can say little by little we transform things. Or you may take the strategy of stretch and transform. Stretch and transform. Stretch, really seeking the limits, the boundaries, going over the boundaries, creating conflict, being truly disruptive. And that may require more energy, but some people might think, what is my style? How do I want to go about this? Maybe I need to change my style when I want to achieve my target. Third question. And final question. How are we doing on time, Federico? We're right on time? Okay, great. Panic, nervous. What can venture capitalists and public policymakers do to facilitate the role of startups as transformers or agents of change? Public policy instruments may be fragmented or short-term. Subsidies such as state policy, the eternal question in Chile, we all need state policy, and it's never happened. And in addition, they're often not clear about their sustainability ambitions. Yes, let's reduce climate change, but what is the path forward? What model do we want to as a country? We also kind of have to have an entrepreneurial vision, but we also have to have a sectorial vision. And venture capital usually is impatient and does not allow time enough for transformative change. When investment was going down, a lot of people were asking, can AgTech survive a funding drought? And they were wondering whether this model worked or not for agriculture because of the timeframes involved and required. And they also were saying, is Silicon Valley still killing AgTech? So it's pertinent to think about the support systems, the financing systems. So we need to re-envision private investment models in AgTech startups. I think that there's much more emphasis on social investment and social impact. So that's good for transformation. But if we look at the environmental and social profit, does it really have to be transformative? Well, that's also a sort of challenge. We need to create more of these types of investors and maybe select them as AgTechs. We need to have our principles, our values, not say, I'll take any money that's being offered to me. No, you sometimes maybe have to pick, which is not easy when you are short on cash. And this is happening. Ag Investor speaks about this. The IDB also discussed this. They did Ag Ventures too. So I think that we need to seek more of these new models. I'm almost at the end of this, Federico. Also, transformative public policies. In my second home, my country of residence, they are doing this already. They're introducing more transformative elements in their policies, placing more emphasis on what innovation has to do. The topic of X-innovation. In Chile has sustainable development products. They transform foods, strategy for agri-food sustainability. They have an office for socio-ecological fair transition. I think that the challenge is connecting these policies, which are emergent methods sometimes are not very effective yet with the digitalization policies. And I think that this is a challenge because to create digitalization policies itself is already difficult enough, as we've seen in previous sessions. And that is a challenge in and of itself. But I think it's important. Well, we've reached the end of my presentation. Oh, no, wait. No, not yet. The answer. I have to give you an answer. If I pose a question, you have the right of at least getting my answer. Can AgTech startups actually lead the transformation of the agri-food system? I would say that the potential definitely is there. But the ambition to be transformative has to be authentic and has to continue to be authentic. And that is not easy because the system is not really oriented to facilitate that. This can be in small steps or large leaps and bounds. You have to think about what your larger contribution will be. I think it's a collective effort. It's not the unicorn model as in and of itself. Perhaps we need to try to balance better the roles of competition and cooperation. And this requires policies and investments focused towards this end goal. So the startup model has to be also present in other policies. For example, right now in Chile, we have Startup Chile. There are some elements of the SDGs, but it's not a transformation program in and of itself. And the other programs do not highlight startups. So there's a lack of linkage there. And here there's a picture. This is from a colleague. She also focuses on small wins. We don't need to simply only think about transformation as something that happens overnight. It's something cumulative. Very well. For those of you who still want to hear from me, look at me. Unfortunately, I'm in this program here today and also on Friday. But this is a paper where we look at AgTech. And if you have any questions, comments, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Lawrence. We have time for a couple of questions. And beyond just the thoughts on what Lawrence proposed, I think that there are topics related to financing, questions open-ended questions that Lawrence left us with. And I think during the financing block this afternoon, where we will have a lot of focus on venture capital, and we'll hear from them. They'll tell us what their vision is and what they do. But let's hear some questions, so we'll take advantage of the time. Oriana, please go ahead.
Hola, Lawrence.
Hello, Lawrence. We've had the pleasure of seeing each other in this session. It's a pleasure to hear to your whole presentation because, at least speaking for my own startup, I feel very identified with several of the points that you presented. And I feel motivated to work harder on some of the things that we're already working on, taking from several of the ideas that you presented. And I also think it's very important. And one point that I've been thinking about for a long time is that sometimes when we are striving for path A, the other options seem very strange. And so people close their mind to other options. But what I'm saying might seem obvious, it might seem a cliche phrase, but I still live in that reality. I feel it. When you kind of go outside of the most trodden path, you feel like something is wrong, but that's not what happens. There are different ways of achieving the same goal. And these different ways are the ones that really nourish being able to realize that you can think outside the box. And it's not that some people are right and others are wrong. It's simply is that the world is not all black and white. There are different shades of gray. And in those shades of gray, there are more disruptive startups that engage the topic in a comprehensive manner or holistically. I'm not saying we are doing things perfectly, not at all, but we're trying at least I think that what we should strive for is, regardless of our individual goals as a company, even as individuals ourselves, and then as companies and as professionals, we have to think about, especially for those of us who haven't asked themselves this question, and I'm not saying that nobody here does it, but the thing is, we need to think about a shared purpose, something that is much more ambitious, above and beyond this merely monetary, or what the system considers to be the status quo, and to think whether there's something above and beyond economic wealth, a more holistic wealth and well-being. And not just because it sounds beautiful and nice, it doesn't mean it's Narnia. It doesn't mean that the people that envision this future are magical thinkers. We know that we also have to be profitable, and that to think outside the box doesn't mean that you can't have wealth and profitability. But this wealth and profitability has to think above and beyond the merely material, but also generating those results. And part of what you present, at least I don't know if it's me, but it leads me to think that. And the people who have met in the entrepreneurial path also think that way. And people that I've met here also think that way. And if they do not, then it's not wrong. But between all of us, we add to this shared vision where sustainability can be sustainable in time and generate diverse wealth for everyone.
Y gracias por tus aportes.
And thank you for your input.
Hacemos 3, 4 comentarios, preguntas.
3 or 4 comments, questions, then we allow Lawrence to give some closing remarks. Very well, thank you very much. Thank you, Lawrence, for your presentation. It was a lot of fun and very good. I wanted to ask you, you were mentioning we're in this stage of chaos, right? Where everything's all mixed up and something will come out of it, something new and different. I wanted to ask you, what's your vision, what's your perspective of what the role of the region, Latin America, could be in this transition process? Because we know that this region traditionally saw a lot of local innovation, but I don't know. Hybrids came from outside, new agricultural machinery came from abroad, agrochemicals came from abroad, without thinking that this whole transition process could place the region in a different position globally, or not.
Thank you. Jenny. Thank you, Lawrence, for that presentation. It's a pleasure to hear you in person for the first time. I think it's connected to the comment, Oriana's comment, and the image you gave of the unicorns. So the question is, do you think there's variety in the understanding of the types of AgTech startups that exist in Latin America? Or do you think we're very much influenced by Silicon Valley, of the idea of what a startup should be? It has to be exponential in growth, when we know that the pace of agriculture corresponds to biologic cycles, and they cannot grow limitless as expected from other businesses. Do you think we need more variety between the startups, but also from public policy, but also from the investors that acknowledge that variety, their social enterprise that seek this technological change? Yes, before I forget, yes, a very good question, Jeremias. Well, yes, you're right. Latin America is like a large supplier for many other countries, and it's very exports a lot of ideas or imports a lot of ideas and technology from other places. But I think there could be 2 contributions to a transformation. First, that Latin America will be part of a pretty much global circular system. That will be very difficult because you have to work in the logistics and make it sustainable, almost circular. and for it and to reconfigure its productions to be able to supply new productive systems, for instance, new forms of protein, for instance, new bioeconomies, bioplastics. So there it possibly has a role, more a follower, but a very important role in transformations. And digital transformation supports that. And there are many startups that work in that. Maybe there, yes, it could lead with new ideas, new ways of doing things that could be applied elsewhere. Or Latin America might lead and say, we're going to bet to be leaders in alternate protein and not go, and we're going to stand out there. But this all depends on investment decisions, long-term thinking, because this requires a lot of time, a shared vision of a sector, of a state. So I think it could take different routes in that regard. And it could also be that we're going to, in fact, say bye to globalized systems. Some want that and make it much more regional and a new regionalization of food production. Some want everything to be short chain to not take everything everywhere, more seasonal food. Well, in the tropic, there's food year round, but in other places, Southern Cone, it's seasonal. However, this is also a political choice, and there are so many voices, and you don't know what the system will do or what the future systems will do. I think we will have parallel systems, but they all have to be sustainable in their form, but it can be organized differently. As far as what Jenny says, I completely agree, and I highly agree. I think that what exists in my field of study is the concept of innovation culture. And many a times, other innovation cultures are imported that comes from certain ideologies, and we import that model. It fails in countries of low collaboration. Same thing with Silicon Valley. It's like the spirit of capitalism in its most extreme form. It doesn't matter if you lose a lot, for instance, and as you said, quickly, it has to be fast growth, conquer the world. I think that comes more from innovation models that are applied easily in existing infrastructures. Uber didn't have to change cars, nor drivers, nor streets. So it was like offer and demand. It could be scaled. So I completely agree that first we have to create an AgTech, Latin or Hispanic, Caribbean model, and number two, that we have to rethink of what we want out of this, and what's the purpose of the AgTech startup model in these regions. Same thing for Africa, same for Asia, for Europe, where there's also a different business traditions, more family companies, less of the shareholder. And so this model will also have to be different. I think we're still seeking the variations of the AgTech startup and food tech and fintech model and fun tech and everything tech. I also think that we're going to introduce Federico Tech, my neighbor here. Thank you, Lawrence. We have time for 2 comments or questions. So, Lian. Good morning, Lawrence, and thank you for your presentation. My comment is intended on cooperation funds that come to our Central American countries. In our experience, we have received a number of impacts. We receive cooperation funds, and I could talk about GIZ, pay for various cooperation funds that are to be executed by coffee producers or farmers. However, they come and they want to remove what's been developed in the country to impose something that was developed in a different country. So how can we create an ecosystem in which we first review or check what we have locally, what works locally, instead of spending that cooperation fund in something that is already functional, because this has happened a lot in Honduras. Thousands of dollars are invested that I consider it's not necessary even to go to Silicon Valley with all that money that comes in, and it's executed, but at the end, there's still developments non-supported. What I always promote is that the cooperation fund supports and subsidizes cooperatives to use certain technology. However, when the fund leaves, it's left without support because the consulting company has no way to respond to any answers because there's no one paying. So, based on that, what comment can you give me? How can we generate that synergy or trust synergy in the cooperation funds for them to actually achieve and be able to review what we have locally before we bring something from Uganda or from Africa that will not work here in Central America? Thank you, Red. Uber, and then we close Uber's question, and then a final thought. First of all, congratulations. I really enjoyed it. It gave us a space for thought, and it's just a comment. Going back to Adriana's question, and going back to the purpose that you mentioned, I think there's a lot of literature being produced, and also the impact, disruptive for who, or what do we understand as disruptive? And the same thing here. Sometimes I feel a fish out of the water because I think there are many things we can discuss later in these working tables. And going back to what Andrea said at the beginning of this week, inclusive AgTech, inclusive, and the models speak a lot about public-private models, but the public is slow, it's long-term, and it includes the social part. So what type of success indicators are we thinking about compared to private, which is much short-term? So I think there's a lot of things we need to discuss and to think about. At the end of the day, is it much more food or much more people with positive impacts, and not so much focus on market returns or financial returns? It was a comment. Last comment or question. Very quickly. Ariadne Caballero, SP Ventures, very quick regarding the comment on thinking of AgTech in Latin America. What we see specifically as venture capitalists in LATAM, we are a fund that invests in technologies from Mexico to Argentina. And we're a region that a few years ago were importers of food. And now we are exporting foods, and in coming years will transform into a very relevant, will be very relevant as far as food at global scale. This region can also be transformed in exporter not only of foods, but also technologies. So when we start thinking about technologies only for Latin America, we're missing out on a huge opportunity. So what we have specifically in this region regarding biologics, for instance, what's happening in Brazil, this is an example that is being exposed as an example worldwide. So we cannot think only of a region of technologies only for Latin America, but also think about this region as a pole to understand what's happening at global level. Otherwise, we would miss out on competitive benefits from the standpoint of companies in this region that are being successful. So what's happening in this region, we must think of technology not from LATAM to LATAM, but think about technology that goes from Latin America to the world. So I just want to leave you with that thought, because in the afternoon we'll probably be discussing this, and I'm sure there are many challenges to bring more investments, But I think we should start with that idea, that mindset of how can we actually think that technologies are making a difference at a much more macro level than what we are currently thinking. And there are many examples of this that we can discuss in the afternoon. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Any final thought or answer? Yes, I can combine what was said. I think it's very important for us to stop importing too much technology from abroad. It's not a bad thing because when they're well adapted, they work well. Like in the case of Chile, they've adapted very well. It's created great benefits. But if these are imposed, if you don't have the infrastructure, supporting infrastructure, if you don't use the local creativity and potential, it's not good. I think there the venture capital agri-food startup can be different or make a difference because this is also based on working with local organizations that are businesses that are already present and working well. I think more and more international organizations of cooperation are collecting that model. Mercy Corps Preventions, you work with IDB, right? Yes. So this is already gaining relevance. And I think international cooperation continues being important. For instance, Argentina works with Great Britain, while it's some agreements, some advisory to sell British AgTech. It's good, but we always have to see it as collaboration, not techno-colonialism. Like I want to conquer your market and take away all the good things you have. I think that's a bit conflictive with Silicon Valley, which is very of conquering in that regard. And they are destroying social fabric, in Barcelona, for instance, it happens there. So we always must debate these things, and we'll do it also with responsible innovation of how we want AgTech to be. But I do believe that it has the potential to be inclusive because it's very user-centered or focused. It tells me that we have to work with the user, but there's also the risk, as Federico said, in a bit of rude comment, and shitification of tech, which is, and say that, well, the word says it, that the model is based on competing at low costs until you have the power, and then raise costs and lower service. So I think there should be certain professional ethics in the tech world, and for that not to happen, and to make it still focus on the consumer. I know the market regulates, but when you have great market power, it's hard to regulate. And that might happen in agri-food tech because it's other markets. I think it won't happen, but you can see it in other type of platforms that at the beginning it focuses on your town service, but then it goes down. Oh, who's going to harm us because we're super powerful is what they start thinking. So I think it's enough of that broad thinking. Let's come back to earth. Thank you very much. I ask you for a round of applause for Lawrence. And now I invite Rosa Gallardo to come to the table for our next activity. So I'll advance what this is about. Rosa will give the details. We're going to have some working in groups. You remember that Monica said that the things that are said here will resonate and can become recommendations we could then elevate and share with political decision makers. So we're going to use this space to collect recommendations, experiences from in whatever role you are, AgTech, academic universities, INEAs or institutes. So we're going to give you guidelines for the working groups, and then we'll break out in different rooms to work in teams, and then we'll come back and we'll review what we have worked. But first, Rosa, to share more activities. more about the activities we will be holding. Thank you, Rosa, to be here. She's a School of Artificial Intelligence at University Córdoba in Spain, part of delegation of the Córdoba University, Spain. Thank you, Federico. And I'll start congratulating Lawrence. Very enriching and inspiring your presentation. And as Federico said, we start a session now where we'll explore experiences and recommendations to promote development and the use of AgTechs. This is a session that comes from the convincing or the need of AgTech for digital transformation to come true. I insist, we're not speaking only about digitization, but also a digital transformation process. And I'm much more convinced after listening to Lawrence with multiple dimensions as the ones that's been that have been said, social, sociological, institutional, and also technological, but of course, not exclusively that. Digital transformation, not something neutral, should be part of a framework of agri-food systems with different models, different ways of transformation. And it's very important to identify where we are now at, what position and what route of transformation we want to be in. My position is that AgTechs, without a doubt, are essential element of this ecosystem we've been discussing, and they will have a important, relevant role, but not exclusive role. For that reason, I want to start by highlighting the importance of AgTechs in a role of leadership or not, but there you must be there. I think it's a reality. They have potential to provide innovative solutions like the ones we saw yesterday and we'll see today and tomorrow to advance in that direction of building agri-food systems that are more sustainable, more efficient, more profitable, also with the capacity to produce foods, but also to be respectful with the environment, to generate jobs, to attract young talent that we need so much. I think all these things can be done, and AgTechs are a core element of that ecosystem to support innovation, but they're not in isolation. They're part of the ecosystem. They have to live with other players, other realities. And I want to use Oriana's words. It's not all black and white. We have colors. These are not exclusive transformation routes or exclusive. Why not think about digital ecology or the possibility to combining sustainable intensification? I think that common sense, respect, and partnerships are core. And talking about partnerships, I think we want to use the value of AgTech networks that AICA has been able to promote. And I really congratulate you for this. This has huge value, tangible value, but also huge intangible value, especially in moments of great transformation or of this chaos we're discussing, like the current condition, and has very high value to express what has been said in the last interventions, the specificity of a Latin model and the need to express that and to work in that collective effort to seize the potential it has. And here I want to highlight the importance of a shared value of working together. So we want to take now this moment and this session to go deeper in these issues and problems, opportunities and challenges actors have to seize that potential, take advantage of the potential that's been expressed. And for this, we'll be working in groups as well the presentation shows. Let's see if we can project. It was on screen before. In any case, while they show it, we're going to work in groups to try to identify problems that AgTechs currently have, those shared pains, those challenges the AgTechs are facing, various types of problems, diverse, some were financing, some were training, some were they were far from institutions, various types of problems. We're going to work in groups and we'll try to select in each group, we'll try to choose 3 challenges or 3 pains we believe are essential. Those are the triggering questions. Which are the main challenges and pains you face in the development of your technologies or startups, and also challenges and pains when trying to get users to adopt your technologies? We're going to take use the space to have consensus in 3 of these. And then we're going to identify problems, but we're going to take a step further. What can we do to facilitate and potentiate these? And here, for instance, if you're a minister, if you had to make a decision, what 3 measures would you take to facilitate and potentiate the development of AgTech and greater use? All of us who have intervened, we acknowledge AgTechs have challenges and issues, but what can we do to overcome these obstacles and to use that potential and take advantage of those potentials? I don't want to leave it there. I want to go back to Jose Emilia's commitment. The first commitments, identify measures and what each one can contribute to, what commitment each one will bring to the table from their role for this to be a reality and for AgTech to advance in the direction necessary. And so with that methodology, we have pre-formed groups. I think we can show these groups. And you can see your groups.
Ahí va.
Ahí va, ella. Sí, pues tenemos.
So we have 7 groups organized in where each one will meet. In each group, there's a moderator. There will be a moderator, and each group must identify a spokesperson who will then bring, once we meet again in a plenary, will bring conclusions, the 3 challenges, the 3 measures in that were brought up in consensus by the group. And so the idea, as I said, is try to identify simple recommendations, specific recommendations, and prioritize for these to be useful for decision makers in our member countries. So with this methodology and with this purpose, we'll work and make use of our time. How much time do we have? Thank you, Rosa. And the time will break out in the different rooms now. We'll have approximately 1 hour for this group work, and then we'll come back for the plenary, and there we'll have the coffee, and we'll have the plenary, we'll have coffee inside this